Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTubers. This is Jerry Diamond with How to Get Out of Babylon. And I'm going to read Lights Out, I think, after I pause it and get some lights in here. This is kind of, I can't even see my own face. All right. I'm going to blow the shofar. I was encouraged to keep that up, and I'll try to do it at every video. Okay, it's not a shofar, it's a conch shell, but it's still same idea. Same sacred geometry, same water filtration capability. I'm sorry, same water structuring capability. Pour water in there and get structured water out. Spins it, puts a proper spin on it. Yep. Take that, you New World Order. Pause it. Alright, so a panorama. The reason it sounded echoey was because the place is about empty. I can figure out how to click. Oh yeah, I gotta shut it off. Oh, and you also gotta. There we go. That's gonna be Jersey's room over there, and put that thing back together, and pretty well got it emptied. Kitchen's about the same. That's my little cardboard table covered with a stainless steel donut screen at the tabletop. Heart. Improvise, adapt, and overcome, baby. All right. Come on. You know, if you did not have strong hands, these things would be like worthless for most people to use. I can't hardly get them to crack open. Oh, come on. All right. We are not even halfway through. I figured about chapter, what was it I figured? I figured the paginations, about 300 is half, because it's about 600 pages. That's about chapter 42. And we are here. So we is not halfway through yet. Stick with it, baby. It just gets more intense. All right. Chapter 34. Everyone left in the room just stared at the dead woman. Mark realized again that he didn't know her first name. She had most likely saved his life, and he didn't even know her name. He felt ashamed. His train of thought was interrupted by Doc Vasquez. "What do we do now?" the veterinarian asked. Everyone just looked at each other as if they'd been asked to find the exact value of pi to the last decimal. Lisa finally broke the silence by offering to clean the body up and wrap it in a blanket. Mark suggested they give it to the sheriff when he brought the radio tomorrow. He would be able to take her to town for a proper burial. "What are we going to do about John?" Jim asked. "I guess we'll turn him over to the sheriff too," Mark answered as he turned to head out the door. "Does anyone know her first name?" he asked as he stood in the open door. "It was Marion," Lisa answered. Lisa's answer in the past tense hit Mark like a ton of bricks. His stomach was twisted in a knot the size of a basketball. He felt the emotional runaway train coming to take him for a ride again. He couldn't afford to let it overtake him. He focused on what he had to do, and that was to secure John until the sheriff arrived, hopefully early in the morning. Somehow he felt the train would be back for him later. Mark decided to consult Gunny on the best way to hold John. When he stepped around to the front of his house, he was surprised to see almost everyone still there. Many were on their knees praying. Others were just staring blankly at what Mark didn't know. Probably neither did they, he suspected. Charlie Henderson tried to ask the question on everyone's mind. Did she is she still with us? Mark shook his head one time. He could hear people crying, but he couldn't let himself think about it lest he join them. He looked at Charlie. Did you see where John went? He ran off toward his house. Would you go keep an eye on his house and make sure he doesn't go anywhere while I talk to Gunny about how to handle this situation? What do you want me to do if he tries to leave? Take a couple of the guards with you and stop him with as little force as necessary, Mark advised. What if he still has his gun? Then use whatever force you have to. Understood, Charlie responded. Charlie called a couple of the guards to accompany him, and they disappeared around the corner. Mark walked up to Gunny, who was comforting Abby. Mark hated interrupting, but he felt the situation demanded it. Gunny didn't seem too displeased that Mark had called him away from his crying bride. After a brief conversation, Gunny agreed that the best course of action was to turn John over to the sheriff in the morning. In the meantime, he'd be placed under house arrest and guarded in his own home. Gunny and Mark walked down to John's house and found Charlie and his men surrounding the house. Is he still in there? Mark asked. Yes, he hasn't even looked through a window, Charlie confirmed. I guess we better go get him, Mark said. Hold your horses there, Karate Man. Since you're the one he's most upset with, I think it's best if you stay out here. Me and Charlie will fetch him out. You're right, Gunny. I'll wait here. Mark watched the house from the spot that Charlie had been using, as Gunny and the guard shift leader went to the front door and knocked. No one answered, and they tried again. After a few minutes, Charlie tried the door, and it was unlocked. He stuck his head inside and called for John. When there was no answer, the two men entered the house. Mark wondered if John was okay. He might have hurt himself after the accident with his wife. Mark hoped he hadn't. He already felt somewhat responsible for Mrs. Olson's death. He had obviously mishandled the situation with John this morning. If he hadn't lost his temper at what John had said, none of this would have happened. But how was he to know? He was just a man after all, and men made mistakes. He'd certainly made more than his fair share. He couldn't understand why all these people expected him to have the right answers. He hadn't asked to be a leader, and he didn't really want to be. Gunny and Charlie, coming out of the house, interrupted his thought spiral. He ain't here, Gunny announced. Where could he be? Mark realized he'd asked a question that Gunny couldn't answer. He hated when Jess asked him questions like that. I don't know, but we better alert the guards to keep a lookout for him. The old man didn't seem put off by the ridiculous question. I'll go. Mark turned and ran toward the CP at Scott's house. When he got there, Joe Bagwell was on duty. Mark asked him to let the guards know that they were looking for John and to report in if they saw him. When Joe relayed the message, the guards immediately radioed back that John had left the subdivision about 10 or 15 minutes ago. Mark was dumbfounded. Which way did he go? The answer came back that he had headed to the east. When Mark asked if he had taken anything with him, he was told that John had a large backpack and his AR-15 when he headed out of the gate. He was going to check on a friend down the road, was what he'd said to the guards. Mark ran back across the road and reported what had happened to Gunny. I can't believe they just let him walk out, Mark said, shaking his head. Calm down, Karate Man. All of our security is aimed at keeping people out, not in. Well, we better go after him. I wouldn't, Gunny said flatly. Why not? First of all, as soon as he got out of sight from the guards, he changed direction. How do you know that? Mark demanded. Because that's what I'd do. You need to come and see what we found inside, then I think you'll see there's no point in going after him. Mark followed Gunny into John's house. They walked to the back bedroom, and Gunny opened the door. There were boxes stacked around the walls. 3 of them were open and lying in the middle of the room. One of them was empty. It said MREs on the side. One said 5.56 NATO, 1,000 rounds, and it had 2 long green plastic packages left in it that each said Battle Pack, 5.56 NATO, 200 rounds. The last half-empty carton was the most interesting. Mark recognized what it was in it without reading the box. It contained 4 baseball grenades and 8 empty spots where others had been. Mark whistled. Yeah, that's what I said, Gunny stated. And there's another full case in the closet. So even if you could track the sumbitch, and I don't think we could, he could give us a nasty surprise. Best just to let him go and be glad he's gone. Mark looked at the boxes stacked around the walls as his brain absorbed the words Gunny had spoken. Most were MREs, but there were quite a few cases of ammo in both 5.56 and 9mm. How did he get all this stuff? It all says property of the United States government. He was in supply, remember? Gunny reminded Mark. Those guys always have a way of getting things if they want. Most are honest and don't, but the ones that ain't can make out like bandits. You think he liberated any weapons? I doubt it. You see, all of this stuff, except the grenades, is considered to be consumable. If and it gets reported as out of date and destroyed or issued to a unit, no one really questions it. It's suspected to be used up. But a rifle is a hard asset. If one's missing, someone is going to want to know what happened to it. I see, Mark said thoughtfully. How did he get the grenades? The old man shrugged his shoulders. They always counted them going out. We had to bring the pins back for the ones we trained with. Well, I agree we better not go after him. I'll just let the sheriff know what happened and give him all this stuff. Like hell you will, Gunny barked. Gunny, we can't keep all this. It's all stolen. Plus, if we get caught with grenades, they'll put us under the jail, not in it. Listen up, Karate Man. You're slipping back into the mindset that the old rules apply. We can use this stuff. Just think of it as John's gift to us for all the shit he put us through. Well, I guess we could present this to everyone and take a vote. You can't do that. We need to keep this as quiet as possible. If and you're going to tell everybody, we might as well give them to the sheriff, because someone will flap their lips and the whole county will know we got them. If you want to run it by the security committee, that's okay, but not everyone. Look, Gunny, nothing. You put me in charge of security. This is a security matter, and I'm putting my foot down. If everyone knows about the grenades, it puts the whole neighborhood at risk, whether we turn them in or keep them, either one. Run it by the security committee if you have to, but I'm telling you, the fewer people know about this, the better. If we turn them in, how does that put us at risk? Because some yahoo will think we didn't turn them all in. They'll come and try to get them whatever force is necessary. I see your point. What do you want to do with this stuff? We'll move it to Abby's. Right now? No, it's getting dark, but there's still too many people out and about. You and Jim and Charlie can load it up in my truck around 4 in the morning, and then park it around back and carry it in the garage through the back door. That way nobody will see. What about the rovers? Oh, I reckon they'll be doing a drill about that time, the old man winked. After finalizing their plan with Charlie and swearing him to secrecy, Mark headed home. He found that the women had wrapped Marianne Olson's body and placed it on a table in the garage. They'd cleaned up the blood in the kitchen and were busy sanitizing everything that it might have come in contact with. Mark offered to help, but just sent him out to clean the driveway. Mark restarted the generator and hooked it up to the pump. He then pulled out a hose and started to wash the blood off the driveway. Jim showed up with an old push broom and helped to scrub as Mark sprayed. Gunny's plan worked like a charm, and the 3 men were able to move all of the contraband without anyone noticing. Mark was back in bed by 5:15, and he slept until almost 8. He got up, ran, and did his other PT, and was just starting to fix some eggs when the sheriff arrived. He brought another man with him, whom he introduced as Greg Hardy. Greg was a quiet type, but very observant, Mark noticed. Mark invited the 2 men to join him for some breakfast, and they graciously declined, but took him up on his offer of a cup of coffee. Mark explained to the sheriff what had happened the night before. The lawman said that he'd get a warrant for John's arrest for all the good it would do. Mark didn't want to tell him about what they found in John's house, but he didn't feel right not saying anything. He suggested that anyone who approached John should be careful. He told the sheriff that John had been in supply and might have hardware that law enforcement didn't come upon every day. I see, the sheriff said. Do you know what he might have? Mark swallowed hard and hoped the lean lawman didn't notice. No, I just suspect he might have had a bazooka or something hidden somewhere. Maybe we ought to look in his house and see if we can find any, he said. If you want to, that would be fine. We looked around yesterday and there's nothing in there. At least that wasn't a lie, since they had moved it all out, Mark thought. Nah, I guess we don't need to. We'll most likely never see him again anyway. When Mark asked the official about Mrs. Olson's body, he said that he could take it, but he felt that with the current state of affairs, it would be best if the community buried her here and gave her a nice service. Mark saw the logic in this. Many people had been shocked by what had happened, and a funeral service might help them to deal with the situation. After Mark finished his eggs, they went to the squad car to retrieve the radio the sheriff had brought. As they walked down to the command post to deliver the handheld radio, Greg asked Mark a few questions, mostly about how they were getting along and how they'd come up with the ideas to do the things they were doing. Mark was careful and selective about what he told the man, but let him know that the whole community had pulled together. He was curious about why the man was asking questions and said as much. Greg explained that he and some others were trying to do the same thing on the other side of the county. Mark hoped he would elaborate, but when he didn't, Mark didn't push it. On their way back to his house, Mark was questioned about the security arrangements at Silver Hills. Mark was polite but to the point. "I'm sorry, Greg, but I don't feel comfortable discussing that." Mark noticed that the sheriff and Greg exchanged a quick look before Greg answered, "That's fine, I understand." When they got back to the house, they shook Mark's hand and thanked him. Then they got into the cruiser and headed out. Mark wondered what the men's real agenda had been. The look they'd given each other told Mark more was going on than they were revealing. He pushed those thoughts to a back burner in his mind and concentrated. Oh man, I didn't have the headset on, sorry. Shoot. Concentrate on where they should bury Marion. It only made sense to inter her in her own yard. There was a particularly large live oak tree in the back that would make a nice resting place. He would discuss it with the others. The next afternoon, everyone gathered, and they buried Marion Olson under the stately tree. Almost all the men and many of the women had helped dig the grave. Rodney and David had built a casket, and Chaparro had welded across to place as a marker. Roberta Simmons, Marion's best friend, gave the eulogy. Brother Bob came to give a few words of comfort, and his wife sang Amazing Grace like an angel. Mark thought it sad that Marion had no family at her funeral, but as he looked around all the somber faces around the gravesite, he realized that this community had become a big family. As sad and tragic as Marion's death was, it had served to galvanize everyone together, and Mark took comfort in that. The next few days went quickly. On Sunday they went to church. On Monday the garden committee tilled the next quarter acre at Mark's house. Since Jess and Lisa were teaching school during the day now, he and Jim ended up planting most of it. On Tuesday, Mark helped Jim with his shooting class. Each night he pulled his guard duty shift. All of the shifts were beginning to see a few more people escaping from the city each day. The passers-by were almost all small groups or families and didn't give the guards any problems. Some had places they were trying to get to, but many didn't. None of them had any skills that the community would be interested in, but the residents were able to glean some information from them. It seemed the situation in the camps was slowly worsening. There was plenty of food and water, but just not enough space or privacy. Tempers were becoming short, and some felt it was time to get out of Dodge before it really got bad. The escapees reported that camp guards were understaffed and undermotivated, and so breaking out wasn't a hard thing to do. Even though none were invited to stay in Silver Hills, they were given any assistance the community could spare. Enough people had signed up for guard duty after Marion's funeral that now they were working the 4 days on, 3 days off that Gunny liked. Mark liked it too. He would have off every Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. Life was starting to take on a routine that had some feeling of normalcy. Mark wondered how long it would last.